Hey everyone! This time on Tim Talks Audio, we're going to compare mono versus stereo. When we talk about mono versus stereo, we really are talking about two different instances, the input side and the output side. Let's talk input first. If we're going and recording some instruments, we need to consider what kind of instrument it is and how it affects the stereo field. For example, right now I'm talking to you through one microphone. I have one source, my voice, into one microphone, this one right here. And that is a mono track. I don't need to do this in stereo because you don't need to hear me split between the left and right stereo channels as an output. You can hear me equally out of both left and right coming to you from one source. A different example would be a drum set. When you do a drum set and the overheads, you want to capture the entire instrument in that entire stereo field, as you would hear it in the room. Another example is a piano. You want to hear a piano spread across the stereo field because of the size and just the width of a piano when you play it and how it sounds in the room. Other examples of mono inputs include bass guitar or electric or acoustic guitar. But what you could do is do multiple takes of the same part on an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar or any instrument, and then take those different takes and push them to the two different outputs of your stereo field. Let's take a dive into the DAW and see what happens when we take our mono and stereo tracks and treat them with mono and stereo outputs. Here's our session that I used some loops that came with Presonus to build upon. Over here we have drums, which are going to a stereo bus. Then we have bass, two acoustic guitars, then going into a stereo bus. This is a third acoustic guitar, which is kind of a plucky lead part, a banjo part, which is another variant of a plucky style thing, and I have a little effect channel that we'll talk about later. For the rest of this episode, you may want to throw some headphones on or make sure you're hooked up to your studio speakers. If you're just listening on YouTube on like a mobile device or on your laptop, you really might not get the same kind of effect if you have your headphones on. Let's take a listen to this mix, which is spread across the stereo field. So there it is. Now let's discuss which instruments were mono and which instruments were pushed stereo in the field. We'll start with the drums. When you're miking up a drum set, you have to think of each individual shell and how it pertains to the entirety of the kit. So, for example, the kick drum would be a single source. You may see people using multiple microphones on a kick drum or snare drum, but essentially that's one part of the entirety of the instrument. So a kick drum, a snare drum, the individual toms, and the hi-hat mic would all be mono inputs. When we play back our drum kit and watch the meters, we can see that the kick drum is hitting equally on the left and the right. Same thing for the snare. In these loops, the toms are already panned a little, but we can push them out even more to really exaggerate that. Same thing with the hi-hat. That was pushed a little as well. Now this track, the overheads, you would have as a stereo input or two mono inputs. They would go over your drum kit and getting the entire instrument as a whole. You would also do this for room mics, although room mics you could do mono as well for really cool effects, but we'll do that some other time. If we were going to take our entire drum kit and put it to this stereo bus, it would sound the way we heard it in the mix. But this button right here will now change the bus to be a mono bus, forcing the entire drum kit to have equal power out of both the left and right speakers. that's it in mono. Let's go back and forth between mono and stereo. You'll really hear it push out to the sides. That's what you need to consider when you're doing your tracking and your mixing, is how far into the stereo field you want that instrument. Next, we'll talk about bass, and you may see people doing multiple instances of the same take of a bass guitar, a DI, and that same DI then going into a cabinet that has multitude of microphones on it. Those are then summed down into a mono channel. If we solo out our bass and watch the meter, it may have had a number of mono inputs to create a blend, but a bass guitar or bass style instruments are typically a mono in and a mono out, keeping it right in the center and equal power between the left and right channels. Now, let's talk about mono ins and stereo outs with the acoustic guitars. I have these two acoustic guitar tracks going into this stereo bus right here. If we solo this out and take a listen, you can hear two different guitars doing two different performances. If we then force this bus to be mono, it kind of blends those two performances together, and you don't really get the bigness of the guitars, which is something that is sought after in rock and country style mixes. Big guitars that are pushed way out to the side. Let's put these guitars back to stereo and do a quick A-B of mono versus stereo. Now let me show you a cool little effect that you can do to actually make your stereo field sound a bit bigger. These acoustic guitars are going to another bus that I've called widener. That's this orange one over here. And I have a few plugins going on to show you different effects that we can do. I'm going to solo the acoustic guitars out and turn on a chorus plugin. Now let's take a listen to the guitars, and as we are, I will turn on the send to this bus that has an effect on it. Some parallel processing. If you want to know more about parallel processing, check out this video in the corner, or I'll put a link in the description. What the chorus is doing is making the image sound just a little bit wider. And the way I've done this is created a send to the bus. And I've also used this slider here on each of the individual sends to pan my send. On my left acoustic guitar, I've taken the pan to the widener channel and pushed it all the way to the right. I've done the opposite for the right guitar, pushing it all the way to the left. That takes this stereo image and forces it out just a little bit more. And I'm just using a chorus plugin with a preset of acoustic strumming. I didn't change this at all. But let's listen to a different plugin. I'm going to turn the chorus one off, and now I'm going to pull up Soundtoys Little Micro Shift. This is an awesome plugin. It's a third party, so our Prime and artist users are going to have the VST plugin add-on for their system. Let me turn this plugin on, but turn the sends off for now, and I'll take it in and out again. This is an awesome plugin that I use on many, many mixes. When you're setting up your tracks and buses for your mix, you need to analyze them as a whole. Our drum set, I would see as a stereo instrument, even though it has mono parts to it. For a bass guitar, I would see that as mono. For acoustic guitars, I would track them as mono, but push them stereo because I would have multiple instances and multiple parts. That's all for now. If you found this video informative, please like and share the video. And if you have a question, please leave it in a comment and I'll answer it in a future video. Thanks for watching.